Everybody, it's Norm from Tested.
It's Jeremy from Tested.
Welcome back to Projections, where, as we promised, we're going to be rolling out some of our interviews that we did back at Oculus Connect 5. Back there, not only did we get a chance to go hands-on with the Oculus Quest standalone 6.VR, but we also chatted with some of the early developers working with Quest.
That's right. One of the games actually is a Quest exclusive, as far as we can tell. It seems like it's going to be a launch title that's not on any of the other platforms. It's called Tennis Scramble. Do I have that right?
That's right. Developed by Armature Studios, and we got to chat with them about how they work with Quest, not only for this tennis game, but a multiplayer tennis game. Let's go check it out. So now joined by Mark, co-founder and game director of Project Tennis Scramble. You guys are Armature?
That's right. We're Armature Studio. We're located in Austin, Texas, big game development hub. So yeah, we've been there for 10 years, and we're excited to be here for sure. Yeah.
And we're excited because you guys are showing off content on the Oculus Quest.
Yeah,
you guys are one of the few games here.
Yeah.
And not a game ported from Rift to Quest, but ground up for Quest.
Yeah, we've been working with Oculus for almost 2 years now, and we started Project Tennis Scramble earlier this year. And the whole goal was to experiment with this new technology, how to best utilize it to explore what can be done. You know, what are we going to expect players to do? How do you communicate to players with a headset that no longer has a tether and you can kind of walk anywhere? So it made sense to maybe explore something like a faster moving game, and we kind of picked tennis and kind of went from there.
Did Oculus give you any guidelines, like the parameters for try to make a game that's room scale, living room scale,
right.
Or is that really up to you?
Well, it really came down to they were looking for an active sort of game. They knew they wanted something like a sports game, but they didn't really. Honestly, they didn't know. They're like, we kind of feel we need something like this. We worked with them before and had a really great relationship. And
you had done Fail Factory for the Gear VR and the
That's
Go.
right. Yeah, we had done Fail Factory as an initial project with Oculus and learned a lot. That was our first VR game. It was done in Unreal 4. So we had all of our kind of pipelines greased. We're ready to go on something new, but we had a great deal of console experience. And we did a lot with player packages and mechanics. So when they came to us with that idea, when we thought about it, we're like, hey, we just can't do like a sports game. We have to do something different. So what we did was we took a traditional game, in this example tennis, that everyone's kind of familiar with, but maybe scramble it together with different sorts of rackets and balls and conditions to make it a little more interesting. And why would it be in VR? So we started there. Yeah.
Right. So it's a tennis game, and
yes.
It's multiplayer, one person on either side of the court.
That's right.
The way it's set up here is as if it's almost one-to-one.
That's right.
But you could potentially be in a living room in San Francisco, you could be in Austin, and we're playing against each other.
Yeah, that's right.
The magic is, it seems like you can have different size playing environments.
Yeah.
And be compatible with any other size playing environment.
That's right.
Is that right? So
yeah.
Tell me about that challenge.
That was extremely challenging, and there's a lot of benefits and a lot of detriments to not have to be in the same room as someone else. Like here, we're showing it. You're actually looks like you're competing against each other on the same similar tennis court. But the trick that we were trying to explore with the Quest was the ability to have different size areas, like you were saying, and how can we make a game that if someone has a small living room, they can play competitively against someone that might clear out their two-car garage, for example, with this tetherless system and have full running ability. How can you make a game where they actually play against each other, have fun, and it's competitive? The first part about that was, what type of game is it? We are not trying to make a simulation tennis game. We're trying to make a really fun feeling tennis game where we ride that line between simulation and arcade. So the number one thing is, does it feel like you're playing tennis? Does it feel like you're swinging a racket? Does it feel like you have agency to do that? And I think we've done a pretty decent job as the core mechanics of the game. The second was, how do you make it that you have a small space, I have a large space, why do I have to run after the ball and hit it to you, but you don't have to do anything and you kind of
And if
your
you have
movement isn't important.
And if you have a small space,
That's right.
how am I able to hit it in the corner?
That's right.
Because you shouldn't be able to get there.
Right. So fundamentally, from a mechanics standpoint, what we did was reach isn't as much of a gameplay option, right? So reach is more important in the large space. You've picked that specifically, but for a small space, reach isn't super critical. It's more about timing. It's more about the mechanics of, say, for example, a football. You hit a football, it hits the ground. It has an unpredictable bounce. So that's your mechanics are more about timing and the angle of the way you're hitting it. So we were able to build that core into the game as these are the fundamental aspects that are interesting. Getting back to how can I shoot it to the corner, but the player's not actually in the corner. We can't talk exactly about how we're doing that because we're still working on it. But long story short is we do have the advantage that the players aren't in the same area, and that they're not using the same ball trajectories as someone else. So using the system with the Quest of being able to set up your area, the game procedurally understands how far away from you can it put the ball, and that's different for everybody's place. So that means the trajectory that I hit at you, I sliced it into the corner, that's not necessarily the same trajectory that you see if you're in a small room and all you have to do is kind of put your arm out.
So it's not scaling, like I'm not if I have a small play space, I'm not a larger character.
Right. So we do things like, again, without explaining it too much, because again, it's still a prototype under development, we do change things like trajectories, ball speeds, spin, things like that, based on how much room you have.
So if I had the room,
yes,
could I do a 1-to-1 tennis court?
Absolutely.
And the game would require me to run to the edge of the court?
Yes, and conversely, if you took that same unit and went inside your house and said, oh, I only have a 4 foot by 4 foot area, it would work just the same.
And does that inherit those dimensions from Guardian, or do I make a new?
It would inherit it when you set up your unit. It can remember many numbers of different Guardian setups, and once you're in that area, it actually will know, oh, this is that 4 by 4 area. That means I can only have the balls go out
cool.
so far.
So as a developer, you can inherit those setups data.
That's right. Yeah, and we use that as a way to tell the system where to hit the ball. We did a lot of work in making the game feel inviting for people, as far as like, I feel like I want to hit it over there, and I hit it over there, and it works.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you are not worried necessarily about hitting it out or hitting it in a place where the other player can reach it. You're just playing. And that's the main goal we're trying to do. So there's a lot of very complex math involved with getting these things to line up. Hopefully players won't even notice, and that's what we're trying to do.
I want to talk to you about tracking real quick. Now, everyone knows I'm excited about Quest, but the one issue that I have questions about is the controller tracking.
Yes.
Right? The volume is not as wide as it is in the Rift inherently, because the cameras go out maybe a little past my periphery.
Yeah.
I was swinging my racket behind my back, and it was moving. I was able to hit balls that over here behind my back while I was practicing.
Yes.
I was able to hit them between my legs.
Yes.
How are you pulling that off?
Well, a lot of it is inherent to the hardware. So we are pulling from the code that's already been developed by the Oculus technology group. So what we do is we're mainly focused on how it feels and how it actually uses that registration and code and constellation information to hit the ball. So obviously there's going to be limitations.
Yes.
You can put the controller under your arm and it can't read it.
Right.
As opposed to, this is an outside. This is a inside-out camera system rather than the traditional outside-in. So there are going to be positives and negatives for both. But yeah, without talking about the technology part of it, because that's not our expertise, there is a certain degree of information that's still passed along even when it's outside of sensor range. So that's how we're able to get away with having the racket go behind you, for example, and then come immediately into the screen. It is able to grab that racket information and position very, very, very quickly.
And that's information that's being given to you by the SDK.
Yeah, we are just grabbing that positional data.
So they abstract some positional data.
Yes.
And beyond whatever the field of view is, you treat that as just this is the best we have.
That's right.
And adapt.
We are not doing anything specific to the tracking that's custom to this prototype. All we're doing is we're taking that information and then trying to calculate the best trajectory and angle to hit the ball to the other side, which is ideally where the player wants it to go.
And you continue to get orientation from the controller the entire time.
Yeah, no matter where it is, no
Yep.
matter where the controller is, you're going to get that orientation because there's accelerometers
And that's
built
crucial
in.
for a racket.
Absolutely, because we have slicing and spin in the game, top spin. It's also based on velocity that the racket is swinging. So there's a robust amount of data that we can utilize to determine the way the ball spins and reacts in the game. Yeah.
Are you watching players here and seeing that they're being more active, less active than you anticipated, and could that change how you develop the game?
Yeah, it's actually funny that players who are more who have VR experience are more hesitant moving around the environment because they have a muscle memory.
Right,
They're
we've
always
been trained.
tethered.
Yeah.
That's right. So even when we were developing the game and we got the real dev kits, we were very apprehensive about moving around because countless times hit our hands on desks and walls and things, and you just get gun shy. We see the same thing here, as where if it was a novice player, novice in terms of VR, they're less apprehensive, and they're more apt to go after the ball as opposed to someone who has had that experience of a confined environment. So we put plenty of safety aids within the game to allow you to understand very clearly where you are, so that people don't get hurt because they get into it, right? Yeah.
You have a TV that's hooked up above the court.
That's right.
That serves a really interesting purpose. It's not even a projected cast of somebody's perspective.
That's right.
It's a third-person perspective.
Yes.
How is that your own technology, and how is that done? Is that
Yeah, that's actually a third player that's joining the match. So that's a for lack of a better term, a Rift version of the game that's connecting to a match in progress. And they are seeing both players, but the position of the players is calculated in a different way than you see it in the real world. So if you see it by itself, you can kind of deduce some of the things that we are doing to get this all to happen.
Right.
But that camera is literally just a third player.
and is the whole game run standard peer-to-peer Quest headset to Quest headset?
Yes. Yeah, you need a Wi-Fi hotspot or some internet connection, but we were playing, as we were doing the prototype, we were in Texas playing with people over here in California.
And you can get that third-person camera even from that, like everything's just connected.
As long as it knows the game that it needs to connect to. It works
very
like
cool.
that. Yeah.
So there'll be a Rift version that you'll download to load that up if I want to put it on my TV so people can see what I'm doing.
Well, again, this is a prototype, so as far as any of that goes, it's hard to tell at this point. Our main goal was to help other developers and consumers understand the potential and maybe the story that's trying to be told with the Quest.
Yeah.
And I think that that spectator tool, was helping people see what was going on and maybe get them excited to try it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Very cool. Maybe iOS version. Dead and Buried, they had the
they're
right?
doing a very, very similar thing where it's another player in the world, but this player can walk around, and that's not too much different than using a mouse and keyboard to fly a camera around the environment. Yeah.
My only question is, can I turn off the football? Because that's what killed me, man. I was up 4-0 over there, and then he beat me.
Well, everybody has their favorites and the things that they hate in the game, and the football is not a favorite of a lot of people. Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Mark, thank you so much for chatting with us. It's been really insightful, and we can't wait to play the game.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
So we gave our impressions of our hands-on time with this game back when we previewed the Quest. And as you saw in this video, the way they had it set up was, even though it's multiplayer, they had us in essentially a tennis court configuration. I was playing against you in what was essentially a tennis court, but you could also see that it wasn't exactly symmetrical.
Right. It was your tennis court and my tennis court, completely different sizes. And the neat thing was that those are compatible. Like, that makes complete sense, actually, if you think about it. They're going to have to be compatible. You're not going to be able to rely on people having the exact same space available to them. And so they've been very clever about that, and it makes a lot of sense. It's the same kind of thing you could apply to existing room scale VR solutions, but it's definitely the way forward if you're going to expect mass adoption.
Totally. You need some type of virtual parity.
Yeah.
And you need to design the game where that you can accommodate people who will play in different spaces. And while tennis, they have to use their secret sauce and their tricks to make it work, it makes me curious, how could this work in a game that's maybe more competitive or requires a little more physicality, or where someone with a lot of space could maybe get a lot of advantage, or make it more difficult actually for them to play in that big space. Lots of questions.
I think tennis really lends itself to it, though, because I think if you ever had a game like this where the two players had to converge on the same point, it would make a lot of additional complications.
Right.
Because you're not where I think you are in your VR space. And so tennis, given the space between the players, is the perfect game to apply this kind of trickery to.
Table tennis even. Even smaller.
Sure,
playfield.
absolutely.
Yeah. The next interview we have lined up is with Sulfar Studios. They're the developers of In Death. We've talked about their game before. Very fun rogue-like game for VR. And we chatted with Thor over at Sulfar about the latest updates to their game. So we're now joined by Thor from Sulfar Studios, developers of In Death. We're big fans of this game. Procedurally generated, rogue-like in VR. How are you doing? How's your OC5 going?
It's been fantastic. It's so much fun to actually come and meet the players. So we've been in early access, as you guys know, since back in February. And it's just the best to meet the players who've been playing. I met a guy yesterday who is trying to crack the leaderboard. He's currently at position 300. He's doing 5-hour play sessions. And what I explained to him is that our top 10 players, they will regularly do 10-hour sessions.
Wait, one run?
Yes. It's like an arcade roguelike, so it repeats itself. You know, it's sort of like a Sisyphean permadeath roguelike experience. And so far, early access has only had the first chapter of the game, Purgatory, which is sort of between heaven and hell. So here we're showing for the first time Paradise Lost, which is your first step toward heaven.
How does that environment look compared to Purgatory?
Heavenly. It has some cupids. It has a new enemy called the Banshee. She's pretty interesting because she has both a primary attack, which is like a spell ball, but she does griefing, so she'll put them on top of all of the enemies in the space. And after the countdown timer finishes, they all attack with basically fireballs.
As far as the environment goes, is it a whole new set of geometry?
It's completely different setting, and the sort of look and feel is much more sort of angelic, sort of large white cathedrals with golden domes, quite stylized. But the idea is that you're sort of moving up in the world, so you're getting closer to heaven. But of course, the gods have left the building in our version of the afterlife. So, the inhabitants of the afterlife are all kind of running amok, and you have to sort of save their souls. And so the boss battle in Paradise Lost is super fun. That's where you encounter Gabriel the Fallen, and he has a flaming sword.
Wow.
And he has some really cool attacks. I'm not going to explain how they work.
You remain armed with a bow and arrow?
Yes.
Okay.
Bow and arrow, but now we also have the crossbow, which we're introducing on Tuesday.
Right.
The crossbow, as you'd imagine, it's a pretty fun sort of shotgun-style weapon. But what I enjoy doing with it is using it like a 6-shooter. So I shoot from the hip, and I reload really fast, just like this. Super fun. And I've been watching people play with it. It's just a completely different play style because you can do short-range attacks, like move into a big room full of enemies and just take them out.
So I was going to ask, with these people playing for 10 hours on this huge run, are they playing cautiously or are they running and gunning?
It's a great question. I think they all have slightly different styles. They play cautiously because the stakes become so high.
Yeah.
You can just imagine you're into your 9th hour of a run. You're looking at your score. You're about 100,000 points from cracking the top 10. Yeah, it's high stakes.
You put your headset down, take a breather, come back in.
Yep.
You're back in the world.
Yeah, that's what happens because we have save points between levels. So if you're able to complete a run, you can exit the game and it will auto-save at that point. But if you commit to a run, there's no going back. It's permadeath in the run. So you lose all of your score, all of it's basically out. So yeah, it's...
One of the coolest things about the procedurally generated aspect is you can see it build out.
That's right.
When the game's rolling out. So when designing the engine for this, was that designed so it would work for different templates or certain styles? What type of diversity of environments?
No, it's a great question. So we really wanted to express visually that this is a roguelike where there's a random seed that creates a different level set each time you play. So we did create our own procedural system within Unreal Engine, which is our engine of choice. So that was some custom code that we put together, and it just has a sort of nice, poetic feeling when you're seeing the castles rise from the mist and coming together, and it adds a lot to the kind of just the impressiveness of your first encounter with it.
It brings the idea of a random level generation to life in a way that's very clear to even someone who's not familiar with roguelikes. I think.
Yes. Yeah, although my buddy in Finland tells me that we really can't call it a roguelike because it's not turn-based.
Some people
Very
are
technically correct,
Yes.
I suppose. Yeah.
And I think we're even supposed to be called a roguelite.
roguelite.
To use the correct nomenclature.
Well, you be you. We're going to call it a roguelite.
Here at Connect 5, clearly the big thing is the Oculus Quest.
Yes.
Standalone, it's controller parity with the Rift,
Yes.
and as we're using this, it feels like a lot of in-depth could apply to Quest. Is this something that could work in a mobile SoC, you think?
We had the same idea. We love Quest. I mean, we've had dev kits for a while, been sort of looking at how we could adapt in-depth potentially to run on Quest, and we're certainly looking at it. We haven't announced anything, and
Sure.
nothing is confirmed, but we love the device.
Is that something that, if you're going with the Unreal Engine, that you would want Epic's support with? I know that they're talking about bringing Robo Recall over.
That's right. They talked about that yesterday in the keynote.
That's right. So
super exciting.
Is that something that would benefit Unreal developers if there was, from an Unreal Engine,
Yes.
a save as kind of situation?
Yeah.
No.
And I think what Epic have done, which is so amazing with Unreal Engine, is the halo effect of Fortnite to run on more constrained devices
Yep.
now. That the latest version of Unreal is benefiting, I think, hugely from the work they've done on Fortnite, and you'll see that flow into things like games running on Quest. Because if you can make Fortnite run on a mobile phone,
Sure.
the step to making it run on something like Quest feels kind of natural, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think Epic have a really good advantage when it comes to games coming to Quest.
And we were talking about potentially opening up to 4,000 square feet and large world-scale games. So a procedurally generated algorithm or engine would be perfect for
a
that.
lot of fun.
You wouldn't have elevation, but you could just fill out the space.
Sure. We have one of our players in early access. He posted on our subreddit the other day that he actually is doing. He's walking through the game in a warehouse. So he's got a VR backpack,
Yes.
and he's just been kind of moving through the game in the real world.
Because on the Rift,
he's on Rift, right? So
Right.
he can't see where he's going.
but you don't apply any restrictions to Rift users to maintain in their standing area or anything like
No,
that.
no.
That's interesting. So does that affect the gameplay? Does that break anything?
I've never tried it.
I mean,
I don't have a house that's big enough.
I imagine you could walk into walls, but even beyond that, just is the enemy AI going to be confused if I'm able to walk 10 feet that direction?
No, not so much. I mean, yes, if you do walk off of the actual level and you're just floating in the air, that might mess with things a little bit. We've never actually tested it. We should probably take a look
I guess
at
the
that.
strategic advantage of throwing daggers and
Right.
warping over there still is faster than
Yes.
you dodging
Yeah,
physically out of
exactly,
the way.
exactly.
But that could be cool to actually be more physical.
But I think one of the things that I'm super excited about, at least at a personal level, is I'm looking at Abrash's demo yesterday, where they were basically scanning the room, and then this simple thing of retexturing the real world objects, that coupled with multiple Guardian setups in your home, you can kind of see how game developers are like having this light bulb moment, thinking that if you can apply your level design and somehow map it that way into the real world, that's hugely cool.
How would you possibly do that? Because there's so many variations that you could never count on the user having anything like maybe even their neighbor.
Yeah. No, that's very true. It's one of those things which is a super cool idea, and then you have to realize that you have to do a general case that actually works in the real world.
Right.
You're right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why there aren't a wealth of room scale games, and so many are based on the standing model, because for so long that's what Rift officially supported.
Yeah. It's sort of interesting with in-depth. We support both seated and standing, and it's interesting. We have a bunch of players who actually have some form of physical disability, and they really appreciate the fact that they have a very good seated experience. So it's not all about standing and room scale and so on. If you can come up with an experience that really works well for that play preference, that it works super well. So, it's basically, it depends on what your setup is at home, right?
Right.
So we try to create a game that works in all conditions.
Awesome.
Are we any closer to possibly talking about co-op? Because we talked to you about that at another event, maybe 6 months ago. You said it was something that you would love to see yourself one day.
Right. So we're big fans of Dean's game DayZ, if you remember that one.
No.
That's a survival game
Okay.
that was, has been huge over the years.
Yeah.
Dean Hall created it. He's a New Zealander. He was partly inspired by a game called EVE Online that my creative
Sure.
director made
Yeah.
back in the day. We were all ex-CCP guys, and yeah, he inspired a concept that I personally like, which is I don't think we should, if we do multiplayer in that sense. We have asynchronous multiplayer now, with challenge mode and so on. But why does it have to be co-op or competitive? Why can't it be both? And should we even tell you what it is?
That's Joust. Like, you can. I'll hop on his head if we play Joust 2-player any day.
So we're fans of sandbox game design, and of course, my co-founders did that with Eve, one of the first, successful sandbox MMOs. And, games don't always have to hold your hand. We don't have to announce, if we do this, that this is a co-op mode or a competitive mode.
We'll call it social, ambiguous social. Yeah.
So yes, we are thinking about it. Again,
Sounds-
nothing confirmed. We're just really focused on the release. We'll be coming out on multiple platforms this fall. So, the full release is on Tuesday on Oculus Rift and PC VR, and then of course PlayStation comes later.
So you're leaving early access. I didn't realize that.
Yes, on Tuesday.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so that's where Paradise Lost and the Crossbow will come to all players. So, of course, everyone in early access will get the patch for free, for no additional cost, and then new players will of course get the full set. So that's happening in a few days.
Awesome. Congratulations. We can't wait to play it.
Thank you.
So fingers crossed that this is coming to Quest. I think it's the perfect Quest game. I mean, you already know the bow and arrow works great in VR. It's the kind of thing you can't do on the go. And so it would give a lot of people, if this is going to be their first stick-off experience, the chance to see a really great archery game.
And anyone who's played In Depth knows that while you can get pretty physical in that game, a lot of that physicality is localized to really throwing that virtual dagger to teleport, and so you won't need a giant play area. No promises as to know about the timelines for multiplayer support. They have that asynchronous multiplayer, but you and I both would love real-time multiplayer, which, like Project Tennis Scramble, is something we realize is not just easy plug and play for a system like Quest or even on the Rift. That does it for our interviews we have back from OC5. I'm actually going to be taking a little bit of a break this coming month, so projections will be on hiatus until probably after Thanksgiving or so, but we'll be back with more game coverage, hardware coverage, and news about the VR and AR space.
I hope you have time to at least play VR on your vacation, Norm.
We'll see. All right, thanks for watching, folks. We'll see you next time. Bye.